Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman came out last night to campaign for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz after making headlines and raising some eyebrows for his reported role in the selection process of her vice president. Three sources told Politico Senator Fetterman was so concerned about the possibility that Harris might choose his state's governor, Josh Shapiro, to be her vice president that his team relayed those worries directly to the Harris campaign. Quote, Fetterman's advisors suggested to Harris's team that the senator believes that Shapiro is excessively focused on his own personal ambitions. Joining us now, that Democratic Senator John Fetterman, who represents the state of Pennsylvania. Senator, good to see you. We just read that reporting. So is it true? Did you or your team have concerns about Shapiro that you took to the Harris team?
No, I never directed anyone on my team or anyone to do that. So that's just not true.
So you're saying that's not true. Did you have any concerns about Shapiro as a possible pick here?
No, that's my issue that I ever existed with the current governor has nothing to do with anything that's been talked about or any kind of public baggage, and that actually was in that article. Again, it was all over some cases about the Borden pardons.
You mentioned the policy issue there, but even yesterday when we were watching at that Pennsylvania rally, you didn't seem to stand and clap during Shapiro's remarks. I mean, is this just one of those old political rivalries within the same state, or are there deeper policy issues there like the ones that you reference on sentencing?
No, like this is, I mean, if you'd like to ask, you can ask him, but I thought I was here to talk about where we're at now.
We can definitely talk about where we're at now, because there have been some suggestions that Shapiro's stance on Israel, as well as the fact that he's Jewish, may have contributed to him not getting the pick. As someone who is very pro-Israel yourself, what did you make of those takes, and what does that tell you about the party, especially as it stands on this issue of Israel and Gaza?
I just don't understand why we're talking about a choice that was already made. I was very clear that the vice president is perfectly capable of picking whoever they want. They have effectively unlimited funding. She has access to every Democratic expert, and she made her choice. And that's where we're at right now. And he's right on the stage right now in Wisconsin. And why are we talking about this weird stuff? I don't understand that.
You are right that he is on the stage right now. So let's talk about the way that Governor Walz will play in the state of Pennsylvania, a state that you know so well. Is this something that helps the Democrats lock up this essential state? What's the role Walz plays here?
Yeah, I mean, he is going to kick some ass. And he is just a regular guy, and he has very regular views. Trump would want to talk about anything about Vance and that disaster that is. He'd rather talk about Stormy Daniels than to talk about Vance and anything to try to change that conversation. And then, now let's be very clear, Walz never said that he hates the cops, but actually Vance did that. And now Vance is very clear that he happened to agree that Trump did sexually assault a woman and all these other kinds of a thing. And I don't think Governor Walz ever referred to the vice president as America's Hitler and all those kinds of things. So it's like, I challenge anybody. Is, Vance ever generated one positive headline at all? There have all been one. I mean, he's a miracle. I would have to consider him a Democratic asset. And I want to thank the former president. Thank you for picking that kind of a disaster and his ongoing entertainment and watching him twist throughout all of this.
I wonder, as you listen to these labels being bandied about, Walz is progressive, Harris is progressive, are they moderate? I mean, you were able to carry that label and win a wide swath of voters in Pennsylvania. What's the right way for the Harris-Walz ticket to position themselves in these progressive and moderate lanes? How do they best define themselves to appeal to the most voters?
It's like, let's be clear. I mean, let's talk about who's the expert here. Actually, Biden smoked Trump by 150,000 votes, and Trump barely won Pennsylvania in 2016 by about 45,000 votes. And I have just won Pennsylvania in 22 by hundreds of thousands of votes as well. I understand, the kind of person that can win and resonate in Pennsylvania, and absolutely that's, of course, the Vice President Harris, and absolutely it's Governor Walz as well. And I absolutely convinced that they are going to carry the day in Pennsylvania on that. And honestly, regardless of who the vice president would have chosen, she's still going to win Pennsylvania. She absolutely can carry Pennsylvania. And I don't know why, all of this palace intrigue about the vice president. I mean, it's two main people that are on this ticket, and that's Trump and Harris. And she is going to prevail on that. And it's going to be a close race, as it's always said that, whether it was Biden, whether it was with Hillary Clinton 8 years ago. And I've been consistently saying it's going to be close and competitive. And Harris has a great team. And now she filled 12,000 people in the House. The energy was crazy. There was anything but joy and energy and all of those things. I witnessed all of this.
Yeah, certainly that was the sense coming out of that rally last night. I've got one more question for you before we dip in to what's happening there in Wisconsin. But you have been you were one of the most staunch supporters of President Biden, urging him to stay on the ticket. Do you feel any bad blood for some of your fellow Democrats who seem to push him towards the exit that landed us in this position now with Vice President Harris at top of the ticket?
Of course not. Of course. I mean, we're all united. And regardless of who she picked vice president, we're all united. Any of those kinds of a thing. Like, again, that rally in Philadelphia was amazing. I mean, I took on just all the energy and the unity throughout all of this. And now look at what's happening on the screen right now in Wisconsin, and they're bringing that all across the battle states as well. And now let's talk about, if you want to try to pretend that we want to talk about anything other than Vance on their side. And I can't wait to how long it'll take them to ditch Vance on that.
That would certainly be a milestone if Trump ended up doing that. Of course, no sign of that yet. But Senator John Fetterman, thank you for coming on, sharing your perspective about Pennsylvania and this larger moment for Democrats.